Hey everyone, let's quickly wrap up July. July was a strange reading month, or rather, I didn't have as much time as usual to read, and especially for audiobooks. I skipped going to the gym because I was so exhausted and busy with the new job, and I didn't really go on long walks on my own. I also started to be more present and not put in headphones and listen to something every time I'm out and about. So that has also affected the amount of audiobook time I had. So let's jump into the physical books first, because those are always easiest to count down. And I read quite a few short stories this month. One collection was by Graham Swift, 12 Post-War Tales. And you know me, I really enjoy Graham Swift's writing. These stories are not all doom and gloom. They all don't deal with mourning as he usually does, but they deal with memory. Each story triggers off an event that has the narrator remember something in the past or rethink how we got into this situation, how we got here, and just reminiscing. I really enjoy his writing, and I think if you are curious to see about his writing, this is a good start. Otherwise, if you are already a fan of Graham Swift, you will enjoy this. The next physical book I want to talk about is the Möbius book, which you can read from both sides. You can start on this side and you can start on this side. I'm sorry, there's a lot of glare going on. The sun decided to come out. What strange weather here. Anyways, this book is on one side, it's a fictional story, the other starts a non-fictional story. This is my first book by the author, and I really fell in love with the writing. I started with the fictional side first, and I was drawn into the way the characters were presented, the way the events happened, and the way the story is told. And then I switched to the non-fiction side. On the next side, I read each side in more or less a day, and it was really nice to fly through, and it was also very good to read it so close together, because the fictional side takes a lot from her life. The non-fictional side is mostly about her splitting up with her partner and the life and things that happened afterwards, and how many red flags there were for the partner and the relationship. It's a lot of jumping around in time, back and forth. There's no clear linear storyline. So if you like that, you might not like this book, because it's really jumping around places, names, characters, or rather not characters in the sense, in the case of the nonfiction part, but I really enjoyed it and really need to dive into more books by this author. The last physical book I read, I also read in a day, and it's The 10 Loves of Mr. Nishino. This is the perspectives of lovers that Mr. Nishino had. So we don't get his perspective, but the women's perspective, and also about their relationship. And in the beginning, I had the feeling that Mr. Nishino is kind of a womanizer. He's not a nice man. But the more you get to know him, you also notice that the women also try not to fall in love with him. So this is a very common theme in this book, that all these women try very hard not to fall in love with him, while he is desperately looking for love. And he's very, well, he's not faithful. He seems to have at least more than one person on the go at the same time, all the time, which is why the women are protecting themselves, but he's not also giving himself up to be so vulnerable. I hate this word. I really like the writing style. It's just like the other books the author wrote. I read 2 of her other books, and I really like the dryness of the writing, the clear-cut presentation of things. I'm enjoying that immensely. And you really get to know the characters in this book, even though they're just shortly with you. Each chapter has a different narrator and then disappears afterwards. They don't really show up again. And I highly recommend this. It was very enjoyable. I mentioned before that I read quite a few short stories in July. The next one I didn't read in a collection, but it was just separately, and that's a new addition to the Murderbot Diaries. This short story fits best in the storyline after the second novella, Artificial Condition, because it's completely from the perspective of art, and it is showing what happened after Murderbot left art and met up with its crew again, and how it's talking to them and rethinking what happened. It's a short story. It's fun to read. I wouldn't read it if you have never read Murderbot. I would also not read it if you haven't read the first 2 books. So you should read it in order. You can still read it if you've read, like me, all the books already and are in love with everything that has to do with the Murderbot Diaries. So I'm biased. I cannot tell if it's bad or good. I enjoyed it immensely. Before I move on to the 2 audiobooks I listened to, let's quickly talk about more short stories, or rather a short story collection I put aside for now. I read Girl with Curious Hair by David Foster Wallace, and I noticed that my brain is not up for David Foster Wallace's style of writing yet. I really enjoyed the writing style, but I didn't get a lot of it. These stories were a little too confusing for me, and I couldn't quite get why they are in a collection. I only read 5 of, I forgot how many, but I'm halfway through. And the more I read, the less I understood, so I put it aside. In the beginning, I thought the stories were connected by having queer characters, but then the last one didn't have a queer character. So that didn't happen. And content-wise, they were all different, and they all had a different writing style. And I really enjoyed that each felt like the narration was completely different from the other. You know how you normally have short stories by the same author and they are similar in style and writing, that you can recognize it. And these all felt like they were completely different in how they were narrated and the narrative voices. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm going to pick up the stories at some point to finish that collection, but it might take a while. So on to audiobooks. I listened to a nonfiction, Daily Rituals, Women at Work, and this is a sequel. The author wrote the same book about generally people, but he noticed that it was much more focused on men than on women, and that women apparently work differently, surprise, because of the situation they were in. You know, how men can concentrate on just the work stuff while the women do all the things, and the women have to do the work stuff and everything else. And it is a very nice collection, and it was easy to fly through, but I would not recommend listening to it as an audiobook. It feels more like a coffee table book where you can pick up a chapter every now and again, or if you're that type of person who reads a short story or something every morning, then that would be perfect, because it's very short chapters that focus on different women and combine or collect the notes we have on how they worked into a shorter essay or snippet of their work life. And it was interesting to hear about 100 plus women, I think, how they worked in different fields, and I enjoyed it. But like I said, listening to it, it was hard to grasp everything, and it was easy to fly through, but sitting down with it might be nicer if you're that type of reader. I'm not. I would like to be the reader who has a book going somewhere where she just reads a chapter a day and then thinks about it for the rest of the day, but I'm not. Anyways, the last book I listened to was Der Steppenwolf, the German classic, and I really enjoyed that. A lot of people I know read that in high school, and I didn't, and I'm quite glad about that, because the book follows a 50-something man who's very discontent with life. He doesn't feel happy and joy in his life. Even on a good day, he finds himself a little bit depressed at the end of the day, and he's always been like, as soon as things get too much, I can always kill myself. So there's a lot of suicide ideation in there. Be careful and aware of that if you go into this. And the book starts off very factual, with someone talking about the character and giving us information about the character, the situation that things happened in. Then there's other talk about the events and also the suicide ideation, what it is, and some philosophical thoughts on identity, because our main character looks at himself as having 2 identities. One is more the Steppenwolf, who's like wild beast intentions and ambitions, and the other one is the more humane, quiet, societal civilian. In German it would be Bürgertum, but I never really find a good word. The bourgeois is not the same thing in general. That's those 2 identities he has inside of him that he's struggling to combine, but the information we get around that is that actually there's more than just two identities inside yourself that you have to deal with and things like that. And then the story flows from his diaries and the events that happen, where he meets a young woman who introduces him to enjoyment and appreciating life more, and events happen. And that happens because he tried to kill himself, but then he got scared of killing himself. So much for the easy way out. And yeah, the book ends a little bit open-ended, so I'm not exactly sure what I think about that, but I really enjoyed it. And I also am pretty sure I really enjoyed it because I am 50 now and not in my high school teenage years where I would have just scoffed at everything. Teenage people wasn't very smart sometimes. That was all my reading in July. Let me know in comments how your July went. What have you read? Have you read any of the books I mentioned? Did you also find that life changes affect your reading? Because this is the most obvious how some small change in my life really affected my reading. Haven't seen that in a long time. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and let's talk in comments. Bye-bye. And sorry about all the glare.